Fogpiercer is at its best when one artillery shell destroys half an enemy convoy. You hit that lead vehicle, the blast throws it backwards into the car behind it. All of a sudden, that car lands on the tracks, you crush it with your train, and in the middle of this chain reaction, two of your enemies shoot each other because you moved your train out of the way at just the right moment. When all that works, Fogpiercer is just clever, chaotic, and extremely satisfying. It feels less like trading damage and more like solving a moving battlefield puzzle. Your positioning matters, the timing of events matter, the order you play your cards matter, and then Fogpiercer starts to take those options away. You get introduced to heavy enemies that are going to resist many of the most interesting abilities. Your movement is going to start costing so much energy that repositioning will feel like a punishment, and all of a sudden you lose one of your train cars, one carriage, and your deck no longer functions. You're losing weapons and defensive tools attached to it. The longer I played, the more it felt like Fogpiercer has built a genuinely interesting tactical system and then surrounded it with progression, balance, and a run structure that discouraged me from using it. Hi, I'm Vadd, and the question of my review here is not whether Fogpiercer has a good idea, because it does. When Fogpiercer lets you manipulate the battlefield, it can be excellent. The question today is whether that idea is strong enough to survive the long runs, repetitive unlock requirements, technical problems, and a difficulty curve that can take one mistake and turn everything into a complete collapse. Fogpiercer here is a roguelike deck builder that's built around a train racing through a world consumed by fog. And at the beginning of each run, you choose your driver, your locomotive, the carriages and cars attached to it, and these choices start to determine your starting deck. Your driver is going to provide unique abilities, while your locomotive, the engine there, and the carriage, the cars you have on, are going to add cards to your deck. Your weapon carriage might give you an artillery attack. You might choose a support carriage that provides you with shields. There's other tools down the road to hack enemies, move vehicles, and just genuinely change the way you interact with the battlefield. You're going to then follow this up with a branching map filled with battles, shops, random events, repair stations, upgrades, and regional bosses. I think this structure is familiar. The important difference here is what happens when a battle begins. Your train sits on a small tactical grid surrounded by enemy vehicles. Right at the start, every enemy clearly shows where it intends to move, what space it's planning to attack, how much damage it's going to deal, and you're going to spend a limited number of action points playing cards and repositioning your train. Yes, you can leave an enemy's fire line, or you can try and trick two enemies into shooting each other. You can push vehicles off walls, into cliffs, into other enemies, into the path of your train. Each turn is truly a small tactical puzzle, and I think that battlefield puzzle is the strongest part of Fogpiercer. When I go over my notes and I look back at things, to me, Fogpiercer makes a strong first impression, not really a lasting one. These tools quickly demonstrate what combat can do. You build shields, you fire your artillery, you move your enemies, and you create these satisfying chain reactions. If you already understand turn-based games, I think the first run may even feel a little too easy. I think that first run stays interesting because everything is new. You're learning how attacks are telegraphed, how collision works, and how each of the carriages in your train affects your deck. And then Fogpiercer starts to push you into this slow meta progression. You need to unlock new drivers, locomotives, and carriages, and these often require deep, heavy investments with more runs with the tools you already actually understand. This repetition, yes, it's expected in the rogue-like genre, but that doesn't mean a game shouldn't provide a strong reason to start again. Because the facts are, a lot of the most exciting possibilities are locked behind progression. You're not repeating runs because the current build is exciting to master, you're repeating them because there's a more interesting version of the game that still seems to be just ahead of you. And I think this is frustrating because Fogpiercer's core promise is so strong. At its best, you can dodge an attack so two enemies shoot each other. You can blast a vehicle into a wall. You can push them onto the tracks. You can send one car crashing backwards through an entire convoy. These are the moments that separate Fogpiercer from a more traditional deck builder. But the game does not consistently support them. Many displacement effects only work on light enemies, so heavier units take away those creative tools and your basic damaging cards. Yes, your attack still works, but the interesting part starts to disappear. Movement becomes more expensive. Every time you reposition the train, it consumes a number of action points, and all of a sudden you're left unable to attack and defend or use the card combination that your entire deck you're planning is built around. And this positioning is supposed to define the combat, and yet the game here frequently teaches you to avoid moving your train unless it's absolutely necessary. At the same time, losing a single car from your train, a single carriage, is wildly punishing. It adds in these malfunctioning cards, which not only drain action points, they also remove the weapons or defenses attached to that section of the train. You have this card that absolutely destroys everything while at the same time you lose everything. There's just one bad turn can make the entire run feel completely unwinnable. I think Fogpiercer's premise promises a level of tactical improvisation, but too often it becomes a test of avoiding an unrecoverable failure state. Hey, if this review is making sense, liking the video helps more people find it. I review games from beginning to end all the time here on the channel and is supported by viewers just like you. If there's a single pay what you want Patreon option that helps fund future videos, thank you. Listen, Fogpiercer is easy to understand. The enemies are going to show their intentions, you draw cards, you spend action points, you try to solve the turn. I think the problem here is that many battles begin at maximum pressure. Right at turn 1 is always the worst possible situation. You start surrounded by enemies. You only have the opening draw of cards to decide how much damage you can do, whether you can move, what your defensive options are. It really prevents your strategy from ever really opening up. Enemies also behave with near perfect efficiency. They often avoid every hazard whenever possible, they rarely misposition themselves, and they wait for you to make the mistake. I think that these encounters feel less like battles against desperate bandits in a fog-covered world, and instead it feels much more like a system designed to punish one bad move. And I think the action point economy makes this whole situation worse, because moving, repairing, and defending can consume most everything you have in a turn. This leaves very little room for the creative tools that make the combat interesting. Yes, you can win a run with most every car, but some of the cars are clearly significantly better to have those carriages in your train. For example, the Protector carriage feels very important because it provides reliable shields, but it's also maybe the least interesting thing out there. I get it, the shield keeps you alive, but it never creates that chain reaction or manipulates the battlefield. Yes, the game can overwhelm you quickly, so you choose the Protector so that you have an option for shields, and now suddenly it feels less like a play style and more like paying an entry fee. Because instead of encouraging different answers, Fogpiercer often makes the safest, most boring option feel like the responsible, reasonable choice, and the creative builds feel reckless. I'm not here saying that the card system lacks depth. I actually think that Fogpiercer is extremely satisfying when you do solve a difficult turn through positioning and timing instead of just raw damage numbers. Because the enemy intentions are fully visible, the challenge is often playing the right card in the right order. You can play the same cards in a different order and produce a completely different result all the time. You have all kinds of draw effects, discount, and exhaust mechanics that also create an aggressive play style that can definitely change the pace of the encounter. Overall, though, the upgrades remain uneven. Some changes are meaningful and really expand your strategy. Others provide such a minor bonus that just barely affects how you play. Okay, your card's slightly cheaper. I'm still going to play it no matter the cost. A lot of the passive effects you unlock through the relics just aren't that meaningful, because at the core of a lot of the changes in meta progression, the numbers change but your decisions do not. Fogpiercer is strongest when cards are reshaping the tactical puzzle, not when progression makes the same answer just slightly cheaper or a little safer. And I think this exact issue extends into the wider progression system. There are plenty of cards, drivers, locomotives, carriages, each of the train configurations changes your starting deck, the combat actions. I think there's excellent foundation here for true variety, but the problem remains how slow that variety unlocks. New characters and equipment can require several runs. Oftentimes, early on, you're going to understand the weakness of your current train long before the game gives you a meaningful alternative. I think progression should be pulling you forward, and here it feels like a barrier between you and the game's most creative systems. I think often of the cargo card. It's especially weak. It adds a card to your deck that usually does basically nothing during combat, and later on you deliver it for a small currency. This is supposed to create a risk and reward decision, but the reward rarely feels worth repeating, and drawing a useless card is very dangerous during the encounters. Yes, Fogpiercer has plenty to unlock, it just doesn't make unlocking it very exciting. You know, I think a difficult roguelike does not need to protect the player from every mistake. Failure can be the point, but I think failure should teach you something or create a new decision, and when you lose a train in your car, it does neither. These malfunction cards clog up your deck, they consume action points, you lose your key weapons, your key defensive tools, and the enemy will continue to attack you at full strength. The punishment for one mistake is not limited to that one turn. It reduces your ability to answer every future turn as well, and it is a harsh snowballing effect. Yes, your run may continue, but the outcome can feel decided long before it officially ends. You are still making choices, but those choices feel more like delaying the results rather than changing it, and that is especially frustrating when the runs often last more than an hour. That is 60 full minutes. I think a damaged train should create a harder tactical problem. Instead, it's choosing to automatically erase the build that you had that made the run interesting. I think Fogpiercer's premise gives the game a clear identity. You've got this train racing through the world of fog, you have these bandits attacking it, the visuals in the battles are easy to read, enemy intentions, attack spacing, vehicle position, it's all clearly shown, and that clarity is essential because oftentimes you'll have many enemies surrounding your train at once. The main presentation problem here remains pacing. Yes, you can speed up enemy turns, but as battles become more and more crowded, even at the fastest speeds, you're going to spend time watching enemies perform actions you already understood were going to happen before you ended your turn. And you know what? This sounds so minor. You're saying, Vadd, you can speed up their actions, you know what's going to happen, what's the big deal? Across the long runs filled with large groups of enemies, this becomes a point of friction, and the technical problems here are harder to overlook. There's nothing worse than going through an hour run and at the end having a crash. At the end, having a card just freeze on your screen and you can't play. I lost no less than 3 runs well past the 45-minute point to game-breaking problems. For a game that's built around long, continuous runs, I think stability matters more than ever. Because a crash during a short mission is kind of annoying, right? You can kind of overlook a couple of short missions, but a crash during a long roguelike run, hours in, really destroys the motivation to restart your run. Fogpiercer launched at a base price of $20 and I think it offers plenty of raw content. There are loads of cars, multiple drivers, multiple locomotives, carriages, bosses, regional modifiers, upgrades, progression paths. The problem is not quantity here for me. I think it's how slowly that content changes the experience, because a large card count does not automatically create variety when many of the upgrades provide very minor improvements. And oftentimes, the same starting shield support carriage remains one of the optimal safest choices. I don't think multiple characters improve the opening hours because unlocking them requires 10, 20, 30, so many of the exact same runs until you beat that boss. And these long runs also, I think, further complicate the value for money question. If you're someone who enjoys the structure, you can spend a great deal of time here mastering the systems and unlocking new combinations. But if the first completed run to you feels repetitive, the slow progression is going to give you very little reason to continue. Fogpiercer can provide many hours, but some of those hours for me feel stretched rather than valuable. I think it's best suited for players who really enjoy difficult tactical puzzles, who like to study the enemy intentions and plan several moves ahead and accept harsh consequences. This is more a battlefield puzzle with cards than a traditional deck builder focused on refining your deck. I think this is a harder one to recommend to anyone who's looking for a shorter run, more forgiving mistakes, faster unlocks, more flexible positioning, or technical stability. I enjoyed solving individual turns. I enjoyed creating chain reactions and seeing one carefully placed attack reshape the entire battlefield. The structure connecting those moments is tougher to enjoy. I think Fogpiercer has a strong combat system trapped inside a frustrating roguelike structure. The foundation here works, but the systems built around it keep getting in its way. I think Fogpiercer already knows how to make one great turn, and now it needs to build a better game around it. Shorter runs, faster progression, better recovery, more flexible interactions, and a stronger technical stability. At the time of review, Fogpiercer is awarded a 2 out of 5. I do not recommend.